Hello, my name is Alycia Hoagland, and I am completing my practicum for my Master of Public Health with a nutrition emphasis at Liberty University in conjunction with Alo Civitas Consulting LLC. My project aims to answer the question, where do children learn healthy eating and lifestyle habits, with the goal to reduce the incidence of childhood obesity within our communities. Due to childhood obesity rates rising with age, my thought is that the earlier we impact children, the higher likelihood we have for success. In early childhood, I find that those working in childhood centers can have the greatest impact in teaching children to create healthy lifestyle habits that will build a solid health foundation for life. Simply eating healthy, nutritious foods is not enough to build this foundation. Join me in helping to make the gray science of nutrition more black and white. Did you know that children in full-time childcare eat half to two-thirds of their dietary intake while in care? Join me as we cover one of my favorite topics, food labels and ingredients. While the United States has very high rates of childhood obesity, they are also always coming up with educational resources that are just a click away to help in combating this. The nutrition facts label can be a tricky concept. Even more challenging is how to understand an ingredients label. This is one of my favorite topics as it is much easier to misunderstand or complicate. But once you uncover the tricks to the trade, so to speak, you are on your way to helping children eat more nutritiously, which is an important lesson in building a healthy foundation. MyPlate is another wonderful resource, and I have featured MyPlate reports for my balanced diets by age group video. MyPlate is a great online resource for understanding how much to eat and breaking this down into the different food groups. By using the tools of MyPlate and the understanding of how food labels work, a balanced diet becomes much easier to understand and obtain. Recently, I also learned that MyPlate has an app. I have not been able to really dive into this, but love the idea of how accessible this is. Let me know in the comments if you have used this and what your thoughts are. Let's get started. Nutrition facts and food labels are primarily monitored by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, also known as the FDA. The most recent changes required for food labels were required to be completed by food manufacturers in 2021. The daily value percentages you will see on the next slide are always based upon a 2,000 calorie diet. This is important to note as it is written in a percentage format. Knowing how many calories are needed for the exact age, weight, and height is important, and a rough estimate of these needs can be found by using the reports within MyPlate. I will be sure to share this link in the description of this video. This 2,000 calorie base makes food labels more geared towards adults. I have noticed that foods marketed towards younger children do have different labels that are more for their age groups, which I think is fantastic. As I mentioned before, food labels are easily misunderstood, which is a shame as they give key pieces of information about a food's overall nutrition. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be reading these like a pro. This screenshot comes from the FDA's toolkit on how to read nutrition facts labels. I will also share this link in the description of this video. Let's start with number 1, the serving size. The serving sizes are now supposed to be based off of typical consumption. I will confirm for you after checking that Nabisco, who we thank for creating the Oreo and other delicious snacks, is still under the impression that 2 cookies is typical consumption. That is definitely not my typical consumption, and I do not think I am the only one. Our second highlight here is the calories per serving size. This is now in much larger font, and you should always pay attention to the serving size listed, especially if you are eating more than 2 Oreos and are curious how that works. Number 3 states that daily values were updated. Again, this is based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. Finally, number 4 notes that added sugars, vitamin D, and potassium are required to be on the label. Typically, these types of things are required based off of the overall consumption of these in the population. For example, the United States consumes large amounts of sugars, so they have now added the added sugars portion to the label. Added sugars are any sugars that do not naturally occur in the food. My example here is lactose, which is in milk and other dairy products. This sugar is naturally occurring in this food, but products such as chocolate milk and certain yogurts will add sugars to these. Therefore, the total amount of added sugars is underneath the broader sugar category to give an idea of how much sugar was added to the item. Vitamin D and potassium are not consumed enough within our population, so they are now on the label too. Previously, vitamins A and C were required to be on the label, but it was determined that the overall population gets plenty of these vitamins, causing them to no longer be required. Added sugars are the sugars that are not naturally occurring in a food. My previous slide gave the example of lactose in milk and other dairy products. It is always a good idea to look at the food or product as a whole before deciding if something has too much sugar. If it has lots of other nutrients, it may not be a bad choice for your dietary needs at that time. A quick note about high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is found in many foods. Notably, this is in sodas and other beverages very frequently. Have you ever wondered why fast food places have soda? I'm sure convenience of a soda machine is one of them. The other, however, is the high fructose corn syrup. This ingredient causes appetite to increase as it blocks your brain's ability to recognize when it's full. Therefore, you will eat more in a sitting due to this. Next up is dietary fiber. This slows down how quickly your body metabolizes or processes sugars, which is important for people with diseases such as diabetes to be able to count carbs appropriately. Trans fats are a sneaky ingredient. A food can be labeled as having 0 grams of trans fats as long as it has 0.5 grams or less in it. This means that it is important to look at the food labels. Trans fats do occur naturally in smaller quantities in animal products. More worrisome is foods that you will find on the shelves. Look for ingredients such as partially hydrogenated oils or shortening. Eating too many foods that have these ingredients can cause you to eat too much trans fats in your diet. These are unhealthy fats and should really be avoided when possible. Lastly, we have sodium. Majority of sodium intake, about 70%, is from processed foods, not from seasonings, as sodium is used as a preservative in these foods. Take a look at the picture shown. The recommended amount of sodium for people 14 years and up is 2,300 milligrams per day. However, the average 2 to 4-year-old intake is between 2,061 to 2,274 milligrams per day, when they're recommended to intake 1,200 milligrams. That is almost double their recommended dietary intake. This highlights why understanding what is needed for a balanced diet versus what a label states in a certain food is important. It can be very easy to eat too much of certain nutrients if you do not know how much a food contains. Some vitamins and minerals I wish to highlight include folate or folic acid, vitamin D, and iron. I like to mention folate due to a genetic defect that I actually have myself. I am unable to methylate folate. Only methylated folate can become folic acid, which is what the body uses the most efficiently. Because I cannot methylate folate myself, I have to take a supplement for this to ensure I am intaking enough. It's a good thing I learned this before becoming pregnant with my son, as this is an essential nutrient for women before and during pregnancy, as it helps to combat neural tube and other birth defects. Wheat products such as bread and cereals are fortified with folate, as the population was deficient in it at one point, so this became necessary to keep us healthy as a whole. Did you know that the majority of people in the United States are deficient in vitamin D? You will often find this fortified or added to milk for this reason. Your body also makes vitamin D from being out in the sun. Since many people do not get enough sun exposure, we tend to be deficient in it within the United States and other countries. Iron is an important nutrient that is tracked in children. This is because toxicity will occur if too much iron is taken in. We must be careful to not give vitamins containing iron to children who do not need this extra iron due to having enough in their bodies. This can be determined by a healthcare professional such as their pediatrician. The ingredients label can be confusing and misleading. The ingredients you see here are for a banana. If you didn't know this was for a banana, you may think this was an overprocessed food, but really it just showcases how scientific names can cause a lot of confusion on these labels. It's important to look at both the nutrition and ingredients label to get the full picture of the food. Many statements on foods are misleading as they don't have a clear definition by the FDA. I'm leaving a link to a handout that is from Veteran Affairs in the description that has these and others listed on it. We already went over how trans fats free or no trans fat means that they could still contain trans fats as long as it's under 0.5 grams. Some other statements that I wanted to go over are multigrain or made with whole grains. The best way to know this is actually to look at the ingredients to make sure that the first ingredient listed is a whole grain such as whole wheat. Next, we have the no sugar added, sugar-free, and lightly sweetened. No sugar added and sugar-free does not mean that something does not contain sugar. They could still contain artificial sweeteners, or they could have sugars naturally occurring in them that weren't actually added. So you need to make sure that you look at the ingredients on these as well as the label to see if there really is sugar in these foods. Lightly sweetened is also another statement that is made, but it doesn't have a definition by the FDA. It's really simply referring to the taste of that product, and it doesn't really tell you anything about the actual amount of sugar or sweetener that might be in the product. Organic and non-GMO just means that, as far as organic, 95% or more of the ingredients are grown or processed without synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. They can still contain fertilizers or pesticides, but these are considered organic ones. Non-GMO means that it does not contain genetically modified organisms. So if you've ever had a banana or a tomato, you have had a GMO. These aren't inherently bad, and they really just mean that the food has been bred essentially to have certain genetics that result in a better outcome or a higher yield of that product, such as with bananas and tomatoes. Made with real fruit is a claim that means that it contains some fruit in it, but it doesn't really tell you how much, and it does not mean a whole lot in regards to the nutrients of that food. Again, you want to look at the ingredients label to see how much real fruit is really going to be in that. So if that fruit is one of the first ingredients, then it's going to mean that it mostly does contain fruit. Free range is actually kind of a sad statement that they put on there, and it really just means that the animal was able to at some point go outside or has access to being outside, but they still could be in crowded conditions. And again, this does not mean a whole lot in regards to the nutrients of the food. All natural is again not super defined, but they could still have naturally sourced additives and preservatives, such as sodium or salt, like we spoke about earlier. And then you have low fat or fat free. And this is really going to mostly apply to dairy products. but some of these still contain as many calories as the full fat versions. And the fat gives it flavor, so they can also include extra sugar and salt in order to improve that taste and texture. Again, you want to check the label, and you can actually compare it to the full fat version to see what was added and if it's really worth having the low fat or fat free. Reduced fat is going to mean that it is reduced fat versus whole. Whole milk is a 3% milk fat, whereas a reduced fat milk is going to be 2% or less. Ingredients labels are highly important to understand for people who have food allergies. The FDA recognizes the top 9 allergens and will actually put them on the bottom of the ingredients list in bold. There are a few ways that they will do this, so some of the definitions that they will put down there is going to be contains, may contain, or produced in a facility that also uses. So contains is going to mean that the food definitely has the allergen present in it as an ingredient. It was directly added into the product. The latter two of may contain or produced in a facility that also uses means that there's a higher chance that the food has become cross-contaminated with the top allergen. Cross-contaminated means that it may have made its way into the food or simply touched it in some way. For those with severe food allergies, it is important to not consume foods that have any of these 3 labels on them, because some allergies are so severe that even touching another allergen can cause an allergic reaction. A frustrating part about food allergies is that they're not always on the label. For example, I grew up with a friend who was allergic to cinnamon. This is commonly put on a food label as spices, so it was difficult for them to know if a food contains cinnamon or not. Gluten-free is not going to be the same as a wheat allergy necessarily. While gluten does come from wheat, it does not always mean that a product directly contains wheat. It could be a derivative of that wheat. So certain preservatives and such will use wheat in them that can contain gluten. But luckily, there's now a certified gluten-free label on foods to help those who cannot have gluten, including in a cross-contamination scenario or in the scenario where it would have an ingredient that someone may or may not know contains wheat. Gluten-friendly is not the same as gluten-free. Gluten-free means that the food did not come into contact with or contain gluten in any way. Gluten-friendly means that it simply does not contain gluten as an ingredient. So depending on the allergy, someone may only be able to have items that are gluten-free. Food allergies in children can be very scary. These can vary in severity, but also they can change or appear suddenly in children. A story that I have about this when I worked in childcare was for a child who was not allergic to anything up until she was 5 years old, when she suddenly had an anaphylactic reaction to a food that she had eaten her whole life. I believe it was like crackers or something that was containing wheat. And this became an emergency, as it meant that her throat had closed shut quickly and she could not breathe. Luckily, she was okay. Thankfully, she was okay. But her mother went ahead and got further allergy testing for her. And after doing this, it was discovered that she had pretty severe allergies to both wheat and dairy. And I actually made her special snickerdoodle cookies that did not contain any of these ingredients, and they were super good. And I made sure she got extras of these, and I sent home the recipe to her mom because she requested it. It's important to keep children with food allergies safe while also doing everything that you can to not make them feel left out. This is why understanding food and ingredient labels is so important when caring for children. Last but not least is knowledge that is definitely most commonly misunderstood, and these regulations can vary by states. So for the purpose of this video, I want you to understand that this is what the FDA requires federally for foods. So sell by, best by, and use by dates, also commonly referred to as expiration dates, are not required by federal law, and they actually mean something different. Each of them does. So a sell by date is going to be the last date that they should be on the shelf by the seller for the best product. Best by is going to be the last date recommended for the best flavor and quality. Use by is going to be the last date recommended to use for peak freshness. Now, a use by date I would pay the most attention to because that's going to be important for highly perishable items such as milks and meats and things like that. But they're actually not required by federal law. They're largely used for marketing purposes because people see these dates, and if they don't understand whether a food actually has gone bad or not, what happens? They throw it away. When they throw it away, then what happens is that they go and they buy more. So then the company that's making the food makes more money off of that product. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something new and can take this information along your own journey to teaching children healthy habits.